Hey everybody, we're back here at Dawson's Market with the second installment of our little wine class, our minis. We're here with Eric Platt today of Artisans and Vines, and he's here today to talk a little bit about Australian and New Zealand wines. Thank you for being here with us, Eric.
Great to be here, Carly. Thanks. Hey guys, hope everybody's doing well. Just so you know a little bit about Artisans and Vines, we are an importer based here in Washington. Our company was formed in 2009. I've been with the company as the managing director since 2016, and we started doing our own distribution in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area just about 2 years ago. We specialize in small producers from around the world, and as Carly said, today we're going to kind of do a journey down to Australia and New Zealand. It's a category that I've worked for many years. I've been fortunate to travel down there, so we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go through. And Carly, as you know, I've brought all my maps. I know you're a fan. This is the big map. But we're not going to use that today. This is the tour map. We're not going to use that today. And then you never know when you're in a restaurant or a bar and somebody says, "Hey, do you know much about Australia?" That's when I pull out the wallet size map. So you never know when you might need a map. But today, we're going to use this map. This is New Zealand. So, get a good shot of that. But we'll come back to that. The first thing I want to talk about is, because I know you're very curious about this, how do you get there? And when should you go? So let's start with that. So remember that Australia and New Zealand are in the southern hemisphere. Okay? So as we're experiencing winter, they're experiencing what? Summer. So everything is opposite, right? So right now they're coming out of summer and they're moving into fall. And this is also when they do the harvest. So now that it's 2021 in Australia and New Zealand, they're getting ready for harvest of 2021. And people always say, wow, how is that possible? They're 6 months ahead of us. So our harvest won't happen until our fall of 2021. But in Australia and New Zealand, the southern hemisphere, it happens 6 months earlier. So to get there, so let's say you're leaving from the Washington, D.C. area. The first thing you're going to do is take let's say an afternoon flight from Washington Dulles, and you'll go to L.A., and that's a 6-hour flight. So let's say you leave at 5 p.m. By the time you get to L.A., you pick up a few hours because of the time change. You get to L.A., it's now 8 p.m. on Thursday, same day. Now you're going to take a red eye, probably at 11 p.m., and you're going to take that 14 hours to Auckland, New Zealand. Okay? Auckland's not the capital. Okay? The capital is, it just escaped me, Wellington, at the bottom part of the South Island. But anyway, 14 hours to Auckland, and you're going to arrive on Saturday morning. So you left Thursday night at 11 p.m., you've flown from Dulles to LA to Auckland, and now it's Saturday morning. So you've lost lots of time, because now they're that far ahead of us, okay? So we get back to the map, and one thing that's really important to know about New Zealand is it's further south than Australia, which means it's cooler climate than even Australia, okay? And it's also a lot bigger than people think. It's actually the size of all of California and all of Oregon combined. That's how long it is. So it's almost 1,500 miles long, but in most instances, the length across is only about 200, 250 miles in most locations, okay? So, and there's only 4.5 million people that live there. But do you know how many sheep live there, Carly?
How many sheep?
Over 20 million sheep. So there's 5 times more sheep than there are people. Pretty interesting fact. But Auckland is up here. So you come into Auckland, and then from Auckland, what you're going to do is you're going to probably, the way I've done it in the past is I've flown from Auckland down to Wellington, probably a 30-minute flight, and then from Wellington, I did this once, I don't recommend it more than once, is take the 3-hour ferry ride across the Cook Strait. Can be bumpy, can be a little rocky, but you do take the ferry into the Marlborough Sounds, quite beautiful. But you can also take a 20-minute puddle jumper and get over to Blenheim, which is the heart of Marlborough. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So Marlborough, right there, makes up 80% of all the wine produced in New Zealand. Now, there's big producers. We won't mention their names. You guys probably know them. You see them in the mass grocery stores. But what we're going to talk about today is a brand called Matakana. So Matakana is actually, the winery itself is situated on the North Island, just north of Auckland, in an area called Matakana. All estate produced, super small. When you talk about some of the big producers that, you know, the Oyster Bays of the world producing over 1 million cases of wine in New Zealand, Matakana produces about 20,000 cases. So you're talking like farm versus factory. Fantastic product. And again, because it's smaller, it's like shopping at Dawson's versus shopping at Costco. You're going to get a much more, I like to use the word cerebral. You're going to get a much more cerebral experience drinking this as you would shopping at Dawson's. So that is Matakana Estate. And I think we sell that here at Dawson's for right around like mid-teens, probably. You know, maybe $15.99, $16.99, something like that. Incredible value. So again, just to finish off on the geography of New Zealand before we head to Australia. So that's Marlborough. Another place that I'd recommend visiting would be Central Otago. Further south, cooler, climate-wise, but they can do some world-class Pinot Noir from that area. The reason the grapes can ripen is because it's a much more inland geographical growing region, as opposed to all these other regions, a much more coastal. If it was coastal here, it would be too cold for the grapes to grow. But here, inland, it's protected by the mountains. These are 10,000 foot peaks. There's snow down here. This is where they ski and snowboard in our summer. Their winter, this is where people in the southern hemisphere are skiing and snowboarding, right down there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to fly over to Australia. So if you're in New Zealand, you probably can get a flight from Queenstown directly over to Sydney. But what we're going to do, we're going to follow the route that I've taken in the past. We're going to go Queenstown back to Auckland. That's about an hour flight. And then we're going to go Auckland in a northwest direction, okay? You know how far it is to Australia, Carly? You don't know. Well, we're going to talk about that. So a lot of people think it's a paddle boat away. Could I swim it? Could they build a bridge? The answer is no. It's 1,000 miles from Auckland, northwest to Sydney. So it's a 3-hour plane ride. And we're heading in a northwest direction, so now it gets a little bit warmer. Because remember, where we are here in America, the further south you go, the warmer it gets. But in New Zealand and Australia, the southern hemisphere, the further north you go, the warmer it gets. Because everything's opposite, okay? And believe it or not, if you flush a toilet in New Zealand or Australia, the water goes around the other way. Actually, that's not true. All right, so again, now we're going to jump to Australia. And here's Australia. Now, Australia is the size of the United States. It's hard to believe, but this landmass is the size of the United States. Except, instead of 350 million, they have 25 million people. So there's a lot of nothing in the middle. Now, our first stop is going to be Sydney, but then we're going to take a quick puddle jumper. It's not a puddle jumper because we're not going over water, but it's going to be an hour flight, maybe an hour and a half flight down to Melbourne. Okay, don't pronounce it Melbourne, and don't pronounce Brisbane as Brisbane. If you want to be on the in, it's Brisbane and it's Melbourne. Okay, not Melbourne. That's in Florida. Melbourne, Brisbane. Okay, so we go here, and then right just north of Melbourne, and the Australian, you guys probably know the Australian Open happens there. Just happened, the Australian Open tennis. Novak Djokovic won, as did Osaka from Japan, the woman. So that takes place right there. And our first stop is Four Sisters. So this is a fantastic bottle of wine. This is Shiraz. Now, this wine comes from Victoria, and Victoria is known for cool climate viticulture. You know, warmer than New Zealand, which is over here, but cooler than these areas here. So what you get is you just get great bright fruit, great acidity, incredible values. So these wines are going to retail, you know, around 15 as well. And under the Four Sisters brand, there's Shiraz, there's Sauvignon Blanc, there's Cabernet, just incredible values. And the Four Sisters are named after the four daughters of Trevor Mast, who was one of the pioneers of cool climate viticulture in Australia. That's a fantastic bottle of wine. So from there, we're going to head north to one of the historic regions of South Australia. And if you notice, just on this map, you'll notice that these are all different states of Australia. New South Wales, South Australia, Western Australia, etc. Just like America. So now from Melbourne, we're going to hop on a plane and we're going to head to Adelaide. Adelaide is a city that was founded by a lot of German immigrants. And around Adelaide are some of the historic areas of Australian winemaking, the Barossa Valley, and one of my favorites, McLaren Vale. And in McLaren Vale, what we say is you've got the power of the Barossa Valley, but in a much more elegant presentation because you have the cool climate, you have the cool breezes coming up off the Great Southern Ocean, coming up from Antarctica. So you get the warm days, but then a big drop in temperature at night. We call that a diurnal shift, the difference between daytime temperature and nighttime temperature. So that's a good thing for grapes. One of my favorites, one of my all-time favorites, and look at that packaging. You know, it just what's in the bottle, what's on the outside of the bottle, and the price point. This is a wine that just over-delivers. So the winery is called Zante's Footstep, founded in 2002 in McLaren Vale, you know, about 45 minutes outside of Adelaide. And this is the love symbol Grenache. So you don't see as much Grenache often in Australia is a grape that's used for blending, but here it is by itself. Just delicious, just full flavored, bright cherry fruit. I would throw on maybe some lamb chops. That would be good. Some grilled lamb chops with some love symbol Grenache from Zante's. And this is going to retail for right around 20 bucks, in that range. Delicious bottle of wine. Now, just when you guys thought we were done, we're going to head to Western Australia. In Western Australia, before I pick up that wonderful bottle of wine, to get to Western Australia, it's now a 3-hour plane ride from Adelaide to Perth. And Perth is now another city that's about 1.5 million people. So Sydney, Melbourne, 5 million each. These two cities about 1.5 million each. Perth, the most isolated city in the whole world, and it's actually exactly halfway around the world from where we are today, which is pretty amazing. Yeah, exactly halfway around the world. That's the furthest point you can go is Perth. Now, I've been here one time to Western Australia, and it's pretty interesting. So to get to the wine growing region that we want to get to today, we're actually going to fly from Perth down to number 9 here. And this is an area called the Great Southern. And the small town is called Albany. Not Albany, that's in New York. This is Albany. And what you get in Western Australia is you have the Indian Ocean coming across, warm, meeting the Great Southern Ocean coming up from Antarctica, which is cold. And the two of them meet in Western Australia. So you just have, again, that great shift in temperatures from daytime to nighttime. We call that, again, for those of you paying attention, the diurnal shift. So remember that. All right. So I'm going to put the map down, and I'm going to show you this one of my favorites. So this is called the Vinovator. And the Vinovator Mishmash White. So the idea behind the Vinovator is get the best fruit you can, there's no rules, and just make a killer wine. So what my friends here at Vinovator have done is from the Great Southern, that area in Western Australia, is they put together a Riesling Pinot Gris and a Viognier blend, and it's just stellar. So some of you think, oh, Riesling, that's going to be sweet. From Western Australia, Riesling can be very dry. So this is dry Riesling with Viognier and with a touch of Pinot Gris. Just a delicious, delicious bottle of wine. And this is also going to retail for about $20. And it gives you a great introduction to some world-class wines coming from that part of Australia, which is one of my favorite areas. There's also a Vina Veda Red, which comes from South Australia, which is a blend of Shiraz, Cab, Vedra, and Grenache predominantly. So there you have it. That is your introduction to New Zealand and Australia. I hope you learned a little bit about those two countries. Two wonderful places to visit. I would definitely take some time when you go down there. I've done the trip in 6 days. That's another story about hopping on a plane every day. But if you have the time, take 2 weeks, take 3 weeks. If you only have a week, you can do it. You can make it happen. But anyway, enjoy. You've got some great wines, regionally specific, and also, again, smaller producers. So think farm, not factory. More cerebral wines as opposed to more commercial wines. Good day, mate. Enjoy.
Thank you to my very favorite geography teacher, Eric Platt.